In over a dozen cases that have been ruled as suspicious drownings, a smiley face has been found near the body. The smiley face killer has been somewhat of a theory for a while, from 1997 all the way up to 2017. 45 bodies of college-age males have been found in 11 states, all in bodies of water. And many of these cases are strikingly similar. While police have just ruled this off as an accidental drowning, New York City detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, both extremely credible sources with about 40 years of combined experience, have been working hard to solve these unsolved cases. They believe for many reasons that police have ignored obvious signs that we have a serial killer or a group of serial killers on our hands, and that they could be potentially responsible for up to 335 cases. All of the victims have been male, college-age, athletic, popular, and high on academic achievements, so they suspect that these murders may be out of jealousy. Almost all of the bodies found show signs of dying on land, and come back positive for a roofie drug. So why were these ruled as an accident? Let's look at the cases. Part 2 to the smiley face killer. So first, let's talk about the case of Patrick McNeal. On February 16th of 1997, Patrick was last seen with his friends at a bar called the Dapper Dog. This is located in Manhattan's Upper East Side. After throwing up in the bathroom, he told his friends he was leaving and would be taking the subway back. And after that, no one saw Patrick again, and his body was recovered floating next to the Brooklyn Pier in the East River, 50 days later and 12 miles from where he was last seen. After looking at CCTV footage, he can be seen stumbling down the street and last seen turning left onto 90th Street. However, it doesn't seem like he's alone. A van actually follows pretty closely behind him, and when he stops to throw up, they stop too. After a witness got a partial view of the plate, police still refused to look for it because they thought it would be too expensive, and just dismissed it as an accidental drowning, even though his autopsy death was classified as undetermined. His blood alcohol level did not seem consistent with the state that he was in. That's when Detective Gannon promised Patrick's parents that he would find their son's killer or killers. Part 3 to the smiley face killer. So why didn't Detective Gannon think that Patrick had drowned? Well, police ruled it this way because of an overconsumption of alcohol. However, his blood level of alcohol was not extremely high, which would not have been consistent with him throwing up. He was recovered on his back, which is unusual for a drowning. Blood lividity is the process in which the person's blood will stop moving after the person is deceased. For example, if you die on your side, your blood will pool to the side. And even though he was found on his back, the blood lividity was absent from his back, which is where it would be if he had died in that position. He had thermal injuries on both his hands and torso as if he had been burned, and strangulation markings on his neck. The most telling thing, though, is that his feet and hands did not present any skin slippage, which would have been consistent with having been submerged for 50 days. Nor was he bloated, which is found in a lot of drowning cases. In fact, the signs on his body would have been consistent with him being in the water for only 24 hours. Gannon's theory? He was stalked, abducted, held for an extended period of time, murdered, and then disposed of in the water. Part 4 to the smiley face killer. So now let's talk about the case of William Hurley. In October of 2009, he called his fiancée to come pick him up from a sporting event, letting her know that he was feeling really tired and that his phone was about to die, but gave her his location just in case. She came, and he was nowhere to be found. His body was found 6 days later in the Charles River in Boston, Massachusetts. This man was a Navy veteran. Similarly to Patrick, surveillance footage showed him stumbling. But again, when examining his body, his blood alcohol level was very low. So they decided to test for a roofie, and he came back positive with GHB, which would have explained the stumbling for both of them with such a low alcohol level. Not only this, but his phone was smashed nearby him. He had blunt force trauma to the head and eye socket and behind his left leg. But again, police said he must have slipped, hit his head, and accidentally drowned. It's so suspicious to me that the police are just writing it off as an accident, even though this man was literally in the Navy and able to communicate his location. And the case that comes after this is somehow more mysterious. Part 5 to the smiley face killer. So the next case that we're going to talk about is Dakota James, who was literally a swim team captain. On January 5th of just 2017, he goes out to a bar with some coworkers, leaves to go home, and then is never seen again. 40 days later, his body is found in the Ohio River near Neville Island. On CCTV, he wasn't stumbling at all, just looking at his phone, and then walks towards an alleyway. 10 miles from this area is where his body's found. However, to have gotten there on its own, it would have had to travel through a dam, but his body didn't have a single scratch or bruise on it, which would have been consistent for going through something like that. Not only this, but again, there was roofie in his system. And Gannon even said it looked like there was strangulation marks on his neck. According to the autopsy, there was not enough water in his lungs to prove that he had drowned. And even though he had been missing for 40 days, his body only had 3 days of decomposition. To add to the spookiness, 11 smiley faces were found spray painted close to the bridge where his body was found. And again, shockingly, this was ruled as an accidental drowning. Part 6 to the smiley face killer. So there are so many cases that have been theorized to be victims of the smiley face killer. Another was Todd Geeb, who went missing in July of 2005 and was found in Lake Michigan 21 days later. He was found vertical in the water like it looked like he was standing, and his body only showed 2.5 days of decomposition. In 2006, Christopher Jenkins is another case found in the Mississippi River. Tommy Booth is another. Lucas Holman, Brian Welzian. The list goes on and on. And I could probably make 50 TikToks on this thing. So why haven't these been treated as a serial killer case? Well, there was a report that came out in 2010 debunking the theory, and gave about 18 reasons why the smiley face killer doesn't exist. A huge reason being that drowning is the 3rd most common cause of death in the US for mostly men. So I guess it does happen often. Also, a graffiti smiley face is pretty common. Whether the smiley face killer exists or not, these cases shouldn't have just been dismissed as accidental drownings. However, there is a first-hand story from someone who believes that they were a potential victim of the smiley face killer. And I'll be posting that story on the middle Reels tab of my Instagram. Check it out.
Sometimes the person that you fall in love with and have kids with is not the person that you think they are. This story was sent to me through my Instagram DMs from a girl named Shay. When Shay was 4 years old, she met this girl, and for the purpose of the video, we are going to call her Alice. They've been best friends forever, but there was always something a little off about Alice, and last year, Shay figured out what it was. Alice's mom was a Polish ice dancer that moved to Amsterdam, and long story short, she fell in love with this guy that she barely knew and had Alice. Shortly after Alice was born, they had another kid named Rosie, and again, with the same guy that she did not know what he was capable of. When Alice was 3, her mom started entering her in beauty pageants just for fun. Then she started winning all of these pageants, and her dad noticed that she had this potential. After Alice won her 3rd competition, her mom overheard a conversation that her dad was having on the phone. The father was saying something along the lines of, "I think that she would make a man very, very happy." And the man on the phone asked, "What about the other one?" And the dad responded, "She's not of age yet." Alice's mom did not know what to do, but she knew she had to get away. It's a long story, I'm running out of time, but part 2 is coming right now. Part 2 of Alice's dad, literally trying to sell her to a man. Also, this is a baby picture of Alice. So Alice's mom overheard the conversation of her dad literally trying to sell her. And so she was like, oh my god, I gotta get out of here. She didn't really know what was going on, but day by day, she started packing very slowly so that he wouldn't notice that they were leaving. So one night, Alice's mom heard these strange men talking outside of Alice's bedroom door. They said, "Don't worry about it. We'll tell her mother that she died in the hospital last night after she stopped breathing." So it was go time because they were literally about to take her. So while the men were in the lounge planning on how to take Alice, Alice's mom woke her up and said, "We have to go." They quickly packed a bag and decided to come back the next morning to get Rosie, but that was a big mistake. So that night they slept at a cheap motel, and then the next morning they called the police. But the police said they couldn't do anything without solid evidence. So they take matters into their own hands and go back to the house to go get Rosie. They managed to sneak past the front door and go around the house to get to Rosie's window, but when they get there and they look inside, Rosie is laying on the floor in a pool of her own blood. I'm sorry it's so long, but part 3 is the last part and it's coming right now. Part 3 of Alice's dad trying to sell her to men when she was 4 years old. So sadly, Alice and her mom did not come back in time because Rosie was dead. Rosie was lying there in her bedroom in a pool of her own blood, and then they started freaking out and they had to leave because somebody was coming. So they rushed back to the motel and called the police, and they say, "You have to go back to our house and check it because there is evidence there." But when they arrived, her body was gone. Rosie was not there anymore, and neither was any furniture in the house. Everything was gone, there was no trace of anything, and this left the police very angry because it seemed as if they wasted their time. Then the police went to the motel to tell Alice and her mom what happened, and then they see Alice's dad sitting in his car outside of the motel. The police saw him, and in a blink of an eye, he was gone. The next day, Alice and her mom moved to South Africa, which is where they live now. But 2 days before he attempted to sell Alice, he got a passport. 2 years went by and they did not see him at all, and Alice was homeschooled for protection. But then one day, Shay, Alice, and Alice's mom went to the park, and they were playing in the park until Alice's mom started freaking out and saying, "Get up, we have to go right now." And it turns out Alice's dad was sitting there on a bench in the park right across from them, staring at them. But that's the last they saw of him, so.
I got pulled over today, and the cop comes to my window and goes, license, registration, and proof of insurance. And I look at him, I say, "Officer, I don't have my license on me, I don't have my registration, I don't have any proof of insurance." So then the cop looks at me and goes, "Then why the hell were you speeding? I caught you going 90 and a 65. And I look at him and I say, "Officer, the reason I was speeding was because I just killed my girlfriend. I chopped her up and I put her in my trunk." So the cop backs off my window, says, "Listen, boy, wait right here." And he calls every cop in the area to come look at my car. So my car is now surrounded by cops, and the chief of police does a whole check. He checks my trunk, and all he finds is a backpack. So then he comes to my window. So the chief of police comes up to my window and says, listen, the officer who pulled you over said you had no driver's license, no proof of insurance, no registration, and that you just chopped up your girlfriend and put her in the trunk. But when I looked in the trunk, all I found was a backpack. I found nothing. And I look at the chief of police and I say, yeah, I know. This lying son of a bitch probably told you I'm speeding too, right?
Another movie you just have to see. Don't Breathe is a movie about a group of 3 thieves that like to go into people's houses, steal their stuff, and sell it so they can make money. They become tired of stealing things for money, so they decide that they're going to steal money. So they find a perfect target. A veteran who lives alone, has no family, no relatives, and lives in basically an abandoned neighborhood. And he's blind. A girl accidentally killed his only child, so he won a major cash settlement from it. So the 3 break into his house and decide that this is the last time they were ever going to do something like this. And they think because he's blind, he's going to be an easy target. And he's not. This man can fight, but you're pretty much rooting against him because you find out that he's not a saint. I was on the edge of my seat this entire movie. Because he's blind, he has no idea what is in front of him unless he hears something. You would think it's easy for them to escape and get out of the house, but not when everything has a padlock on it and he starts boarding them in. This man also has a very dirty secret down in the basement. There is a kitchen tool that you will probably never look at the same after you see this movie. If you want to watch it, it's on Amazon Prime and Hulu depending on your subscription. Acting, plot, and cinematography, 10 out of 10.